All right, good night to everyone. Can you guys see my screen? Great. So the last class we had, we stopped at question 23. That recording is in your classroom. So if you want to review, we basically went through the questions and explanation of each. We're working May 2021, paper 1. So please feel free to give your input to the answers to the question. Question 24, that's where we're going to be starting with. So, which of the following can be termed application software? You can type it, you can speak it, whichever one you want. D. D is correct. So D is an application software. An application software allows you to carry out a specific task. Like for example, browsing the internet, playing a game, taking a photo, and so on. What type of software would be the other three? Right. OS, operating system, or you can say system software, but it's more so the operating system. Anybody know what DOS stands for? So DOS, that stands for, yes, disk operating system. So originally, when Microsoft, the person who owns Windows, Windows operating system, Windows 10, 11, and so on, before Windows, there was the disk operating system. This is what Microsoft used to use. All right. 25. Which of the following functions is performed by a modem? What does a modem do? Nobody knows? So a modem is responsible for modulating analog and digital signals. For modulating analog and digital signals. So modulate meaning to convert. So why are we converting analog signals and digital signals? So you have your computer, and all your computer does or sees is binary, a set of 0 and 1s. That's all your computer knows. So that is also called digital data. Now, your computer is connected to the internet. And as the data travels along that cable, it is traveling in a analog format. And analog is basically a sine wave, something like this here. So there is no 1 and 0, it's just different variation in values as a sine wave. A digital wave, this is a bit technical. A digital wave is more of a square wave. And the one part would indicate a 1, the other part would indicate a 0, and it would be like that. So that's why a square wave can represent a digital signal, because it can represent an on and off, two different positions. But a sine wave, it's constant fluctuation. It cannot represent that 0 and 1 because the values keep changing. So analog is a different type of signal from digital. And since your computer only sees digital signal, you have to convert that analog to digital and vice versa for communication. So that's the purpose of your modem, conversion of those two signals. Now, the word modem is a coined word, C-O-I-N-E-D, a coined word, meaning that it was created by merging two words together. Anybody knows those two words?
Sir, for some reason, I'm thinking modulating system.
One of those are correct. Modulator. And the other one is demodulator. So modulator, demodulator were merged together to give you modem. So mo, modulator, dem, demodulator. So one or the other is going to be used for analog to digital and digital to analog. (26) If no questions on 25, 26. There are many software restrictions used by computers to protect data and maintain data integrity. Which of the following entities are software restriction? C, passwords and encryption. Correct. Because virus, that doesn't give you any restriction. That's not the purpose of that. 27. Which of the following devices can be used for both input and output? Touch screen, correct. So all of you have a phone, and you should know that gives you both input and output. You see what is on the screen, and you touch the screen to interact with it. So both input and output. 28. Which of the following is true of accessing data sequentially? What does it mean to access data sequentially? Yes, B. It starts with the first record. Sequential means in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going in order. So you got to start with the first in order for you to get to the fifth. You have to go through everything before you get to whatever piece you want to get to. 29. Which of the following is a hardware user interface? D. Yes. So remember, a user interface is what you use to interact with a computer system. So the touch screen, it's physical. Hardware is what is physical, and that is what you use to interact with a laptop, with a phone, and so on. 30. An official of company X sells confidential information about his company to company Y. What is the term used for this type of information misuse? Industrial espionage, correct? So industrial espionage is when you're spying on another company, spying on another business, spying on another country, and so on. Third one, which of the following are not categorized as system software? Ooh, such variety. So the correct answer here is productivity tools. So it's asking for system software, which is not. Productivity tools are going to be application software. So remember, application software is what allows you to do a particular task, like preparing a budget, typing a letter, creating a database. Those are all productivity tools. An operating system and utility software are the two types of system software. Operating system and utility software are the two types of system software. Now, translators are also a type of system software. That's why we don't teach that. It's also a type of system software. Let me find this image. So, why aren't you opening? I think I sent you guys this image already. So, the translators relate to programming. Now, when it comes to programming, we have three general levels of creating a program. Three levels. The lowest level is the machine code. Now, I need you guys to remember that machine code has three names, three terms that can be used interchangeably. Machine code, low-level language, and binary. I think there's more. Could be more than three, but that's all I remember for now. So machine code, binary, low-level language, those all refer to the same thing. They all refer to ones and zeros. Your computer sees ones and zeros, we call that machine code. We call that low-level language. We call that binary. So that is all your computer sees and understands. So that means if we write a program in binary, your computer would naturally understand that program. Now, we don't understand binary, so we cannot write a program in binary. It's going to be difficult, not impossible, difficult. So, they created the next level of programming language called the assembly language. So, instead of creating the program in binary, we use certain keywords, like what you see in here, JMP, TWN, to create the program. Now, this assembly language was also a bit difficult, so they created the high-level language, which we can read and understand. We can look at it, look at the words, and be able to figure out what it's doing. So that's the high level. That's why it's called high level. It's for us to understand. Now, when you create a program in these higher levels, you need a translator to convert it back to binary, to convert it back to the machine code. We have three types of translators that you need to remember. We have the assembler translator. So that one is going to be straightforward. The assembler is used to convert the assembly language to machine code. Assembler is used to convert the assembly language to machine code. Now we have the compiler, and the compiler is used to convert in the high-level language to machine code. Converting the high-level language to machine code, the compiler. Now we also have another translator, as I said, because there's three of them, you need to remember. This one is called the, what? What is it called? Compiler. Interpreter? Interpreter. Interpreter. Let me see if that's correct. Compiler versus interpreter. Yes, that's correct. So the compiler and the interpreter are two translators that can be used to convert the high-level language to machine code. But they convert differently. So how do they convert differently? Well, in order for us to understand how, there's another term that you need to remember. That term is source code. Now, what is source code? Source code, or does anybody know what is source code? Where is Pascal? Pascal. So what is source code? Good. So when you guys were creating your program, you were typing your program in this blue area here. Now, when you're typing your program, typing out your code into this text editor, this is what is called the source code. So when you're typing out your program, that is the source code that we're referring to. So going back to the translators now, how do the different translators work? The compiler, what that does is that it converts everything. It takes all of your source code and translates it over into machine code in one go. Whereas the interpreter translates one line at a time. So for instance, how we have this top line, it converts that to machine code and then runs it. Converts this line to machine code, runs it. Converts this line to machine code, runs it. Converts this one and runs it. So both are used to convert high level to machine code, but just that they do the conversion differently. Compiler converts the whole document, whereas the interpreter converts one line at a time. So those are the translators. That is what is source code. You guys clear on that? Any questions? All right, 32. Which part of the central processing unit coordinates its activities? So that is going to be B. The control unit coordinates the activities. The arithmetic and logic unit is used for calculations. So the ALU is always used for calculations, all forms of calculation, whether it's arithmetic calculation, logic calculation, relation calculation, whatever calculation. Arithmetic and logic unit is for that purpose. So anything else is what the control unit is going to be responsible for. Now, still on the parts of the CPU, we would have taught you that the CU and the ALU are the two main parts of the CPU. But technically, the CPU has more parts. And the register is actually another. So I'm going to tell you what are the other parts of a CPU. So these are the other parts of a CPU. So we have 6 parts, 6 main components to the CPU. The control unit, arithmetic and logic unit. The register and the cache are 2 different storages inside of the CPU. That's it in a nutshell. The register and the cache are 2 small amount of storage in your CPU. So we can look at this diagram here to see how a computer works. So this is the basic process as to how a computer works. You input data. The central processing unit is going to process that data, but it's going to send that data to memory, pull the data from memory, process it, and so on, and then you get your output. So notice at the bottom here, the CPU has to collect that data from memory. It has to transfer that data from memory. So instead of wasting time, you can see, trying to collect the data from memory, you can put a small amount of memory in the CPU directly, where you can store very necessary, very important data that you need right away. So you don't have to go to the memory in order to get it. So that is the purpose of the registers and the cache. They are small storages in the CPU to allow you to get that data. What is the bus? A bus in a CPU, think of it like a literal bus. We know when we get on a bus takes us to a certain location. Similarly, the bus in a CPU takes data to a certain location. So it's basically the path that data is going to travel in your CPU. Or even on your motherboard, you can see. What is the clock? The clock is the speed of the CPU. Basically the timing for the CPU. So if we check Task Manager on our computer, we can actually see those information. For example, I clicked on CPU here. So notice we can see the speed of the CPU, 2.2 gigahertz, and we can see the cache. So here we can see L1 cache, 384 kilobytes, L2 cache, 2.0 megabytes, L3 cache, 4.0 megabytes. So if you notice, it's very small storage inside of the CPU. So those are the parts of a CPU. Now another thing here we can take note of. Notice they use the word main memory. I would have said this numerous times. Main memory has 3 terms that can be used interchangeably. We have main memory, we have memory, and we have RAM. They can use those words, those terms interchangeably. Main memory, memory, or RAM. They basically refer to the same thing. Any questions before we go on? Question 33. Before purchasing a computer, James was given a sheet with the following hardware specification. The processing speed of the CPU is 3.6 gigahertz. Good. Now, for the science students here, you should know that frequency is measured in hertz, Hz. And just like data, hertz has different sizes. So you start off with hertz, then you can get kilohertz, then you can get megahertz, then you could get gigahertz, and so on. So, the current standard of CPU is going to be gigahertz. So we can go through the specifications in this sheet here and see if you can figure out what is the rest. What is Intel Pentium 4? What would that be? You said something, Akila?
Sir, the operating system?
No. Anybody? Version of what? CPU version, yes. So the name of the CPU name, that's Intel Pentium 4. That's the name of the CPU. So we said 3.6, that's the speed. This here says 50 RAM. Not making much sense. But notice RAM here. So that's the RAM for the computer. But 50 is not making much sense. I don't know if it's 5G, meaning 5 gigabytes or something like that. But then 50 RAM. Anyway, moving on. 2 gigabyte here, that's going to be the RAM size. This is making more sense for RAM size. 2 gigabytes, because the older system. What is 64 bits? What is 64 bits? There's a specific term that I'm looking for. "64-bit" refers to something. It refers to the word size of the computer system, of the operating system or the CPU, either one. It refers to the word size. What is the word size? The word size is how much data the computer can group together and process at the same time. So think about it like if you're eating food. Whenever you're eating food, you would use a tablespoon instead of a pot spoon. Maybe some persons might use a pot spoon to eat with. But it all depends upon how much food you can fit into your mouth. Which spoon you can fit into your mouth. The common person can only fit a tablespoon. Some persons might be able to fit a pot spoon. So that's how much food you can process at one time. Similarly, the CPU, the computer system, has a restriction as to how much data it can process at one time. So it can group a certain amount of data and process that data at one time. So the bit, the word size, indicates that. So if you see 64-bit, it means it can group 64 ones and zeros together and process that. If you see 16 bits, it means it can group 16 ones and zeros together and process that. All right, so notice we have here megahertz, 533 megahertz. This seems to be the speed of the RAM. That's referring to the speed of the RAM. 160 gigabytes. What would that be the size of? $160 gigabytes. What's that the size of? Correct. 160 gigabyte is the size of the hard drive. Very good. What does HDD stand for? HDD.
Disk drive.
Hard disk drive. Good. Hard disk drive. A type of storage, yes, but more specifically, hard disk drive. What does SATA stand for? Or what is SATA? So SATA is a type of hard drive. We call it the SATA hard drive. And it's called SATA because it's using a SATA port. Well, as you saw there, SATA stands for Serial Advanced Technology Attachment, SATA. And as I said, it's called SATA because it's used in the SATA port, a very small port. So as you can see here, the SATA port there, this very small port here. Now before SATA, we had IDE. So SATA versus IDE hard drive. Before that, so we can see the different connection. So notice at the top here, we have IDE. IDE is basically a set of small pins. So all these small pins that you see in here, that's IDE. And at the bottom, we have SATA. So kind of L-shape kind of plug. One is power and one is for the data transfer for the SATA there. What else? What is SSD? What is SSD? So SSD is solid state drive. Good. Solid state drive. That's the newer form of hard drive that we have today. So what's the difference between the two? HDD versus SSD. So as you can see here, with the difference between the two, the hard disk drive, HDD, has disk inside of it, hence the name hard disk. Solid state drive has flash memory inside of it. So those are those black chips that you're seeing. Those are flash memory chips. So that's the difference between the two there. So the solid state drive is a newer version that we are using today. We can look at the difference between the two. Solid state drive is faster than hard disk drive. But the lifespan of the solid state drive is shorter than the hard disk drive. Solid state drive is more expensive. Hard disk drive is cheaper. As I said, SSD uses flash memory. HDD has a disk inside of it. Because it has a disk inside of it, it's more fragile. So if you drop it, the disk can move, it can rearrange, it can go out of place. The solid state drive is shock resistant. Because it's a board with chips on it, it can take some falling and not damage right away. Yeah. So basically that's the difference between the two there. What would 7200 RPM be? Based on the information that I just told you there about the hard disk drive. So we should know that RPM stands for revolutions per minute. So it's basically how something revolves, how much time it revolves for a minute. So the disk inside of the hard drive, basically how many times it spins in a minute. 7,200 times per minute. That's the speed of the hard drive. All right, so those are the specifications there. 34, which of the following, which part of a private network using internet technology and public telecommunications that can be accessed by business suppliers, vendors, customers, partners called a what? C, extranet. Good. So here, remember that internet is public. Everybody can access the internet. Intranet is, what was I spelling? What am I spelling? Private. Extranet is also private. But what it does, it basically gives you a connection to the intranet. What is Ethernet? Anybody know what Ethernet is? Local direct connection. So Ethernet is basically a standard for a cable that allows you to get network access. So we call it the Ethernet cable. So that cable that you plug into your computer to get internet, we call that the Ethernet cable. Now, it also has another name. It's called the RJ16. Sorry, the RJ45. Where did I get 16 from? And we also have another one, RJ11. So those are the two common ones, RJ11 and RJ45. The RJ45 is the one that you plug into your computer. your laptop, your desktop, and so on. The RJ11 is the one that you plug into your landline phone. So those two cables there. 35. Which of the following pairs are hardware devices with a user interface? Hardware devices with a user interface. F. Oh dear. Yes, D. So remember, user interface is what allows you to interact with the system. A monitor does not allow you to interact with the system. It's just for you to view the output. Keyboard does. Optical drive, hard drive, those are for storage. So those are out. Magnetic, that's just a term. OCR, that's just a device. So touchscreen and keyboard, those allow you to interact with the system. 36. Which of the following is an email address? Which is the correct format for an email address? A. A is correct. Now, always remember that email address ends with a domain name. What is a domain name? A domain name is basically the name of the websites. So for example, if you ever notice your email address, your Google email address always ends with at google.com. So that's the domain, google.com. So the domain here is happy.net. And we have an at indicating that email is at that domain. 37. Which of the following types of software is used for applications with repetitive numerical calculation? Nobody? $37. C is correct. So spreadsheet, that's used for calculation. What would you say a database is used for? So spreadsheet, you can either say calculation or numbers. But what would database be used for? Database is used for text data. So database is the text, spreadsheet is for numbers. 38. Selecting or highlighting a paragraph creates a what? A block, correct? 39. So we're going to copy the formula to the left. What is the result going to be? So this one is important to remember. Yes, C is the correct answer. So it's good to remember what happens when you move a formula in different directions. So if you move a formula to the left and it stays in the same row, it's only going to change the column because that's all you're changing. The row is still the same, but you're changing the column. But the column is going to decrease because you're going to the left. Because remember, C, D, B, so the column has to decrease. So it went from B to A. So obviously, if you go to the right, you are going to increase. Now, if you go up and down, if you go down, the row number is going to increase. So it's basically, you just got to remember the layout of the spreadsheet. And if you go up, it is going to decrease. So the dollar signs, that's called absolute addressing, and that's basically preventing it from changing. Now, dollar sign is one method of absolute addressing. What's the other method for absolute addressing? Dollar sign is one method. What's the other method for absolute addressing? So the other method of absolute addressing is naming the range or the cell. So basically called name range. So when you give a name, B4 plus name. So notice if I bring this down, B5, B4 to B5, but the word name remain the same. So dollar sign and name range, those are your two methods of absolute addressing. Question 40. Which of the following type of chart is the least suitable? Pi. Pi is correct, and simply because it has two different sets of data. It has 1 year and a totally other year. Pi is used for one set of data. For the one spreadsheet formula, use what? C, correct. Values, ranges, or cell addresses. For the two, which of the following is fully justified? D, correct. For the three, which would give you the output? For the criteria, D. Anybody else? B. B is correct. So first we have to look at, we got to try to figure out which is the month and which is the day. So the fact that this has 14 here is an indication that the second value is the date. So 5 is the month. That's going to be May. So it's going to be 11th of May to the 14th of May. So that's B. And we got to remember the equal sign also. So we got to include the dates. For the 4, the field that uniquely identifies a record in the database is called what? B, primary key. Good. So primary key is what is used to uniquely identify a record. What is a foreign key? A foreign key is a field. So say for instance a primary key, a field has a primary key in one table. When it goes over to another table and gets used, it's called foreign. So a primary key in one table, that same field being used in another table, is called foreign. So basically they're in foreign. Alternate key or candidate key. I don't know if alternate is another name for candidate, but I'm assuming. Basically means that a field that is not a primary key but can become a primary key. A candidate key is a field that is not a primary key but can become a primary key. So for example, if a field has your ID number, if a table has your ID number, but it also has your passport number, your passport ID. So your ID number is being used as the primary key, but the passport ID is not. So it's called a candidate because it can become the primary key, but it's not. So, and then we also have composite keys, which is basically a combination of two or more fields to give you a primary key. What's the art of the sort? D is correct. Item number is in descending order. So H, F, that's descending, and then we can see the 30, 20, 15, and so on. 46. Which of the following sequences of steps for deleting a record in database table is correct? Yes, B. So technically, the question has some form of error because you can't say deleting a record and then going into design view. This should have been data sheet view or something. Either this should have been data sheet view or this should have been deleting a field, one or the other. Because you go into design view to correct your fields, whereas in the data sheet view, you go to delete or edit your records. But that's the most logical answer there. 47. Which of the following clearly identifies a hyperlink in an HTML document? D, correct? So an HTML, a hyperlink takes you to an email address, opens the email address, takes you to another website, and takes you to another location in a web page. 48. Which of the following content control would be useful when creating a fillable form for online use? D. D is correct. So basically, for online form or electronic form, you want to give them ease of entry when they're entering their data. It must be a simple method to enter the data. So a date picker, that's going to be make it simple to enter the date. Checkbox. So if, say for instance, the item has discount, they can simply check the box. Yes, it does have discount. Drop down list. You give them a list of options and they can pick from those options. That makes it much easier to do the form. 49. Which of the following features allow the user to insert individual names in a primary document? Mail merge, correct? Remember the letter that you type is called the primary document, also called the original document or original letter. Primary letter, original letter, primary document, original document. That's the main document. And then the other file is going to be the merged document, the merged file, the merged letter, final document. 50. Which of the following steps is required to center text across a range of spreadsheets, range of cells in spreadsheet? C. Select the text across the cells, then merge and center. Now, technically, Both B and C are correct. But we're gonna more go with C, but both B and C are correct. Let me show you. So it's saying to merge them across a range of cells. So for example, if I type in boy, I can highlight all of these, do merge and center. That works. But the B option, it says select the cell, center the text, and then merge. So there's a literal merge option, merge cells, and notice when you merge, it centers the information also. And that answers the question, required to center text across a range of cells. So both are technically correct. Because when you use the merge option, because we have a few merge options, we have merge and center, merge across, merge cell. When you use this merge cell option, it keeps the alignment that cell has. So because I centered it, it kept that center alignment. So this question here, both B and C are correct. Fifth one, which of the following tasks does the algorithm perform? D. So reads two numbers and prints the first number if it is smaller than the second. Correct. So it reads two numbers, A and B, and prints A. So if A is smaller than the second number. 52. Which of the following is an example of a conditional construct? A, that's correct. So remember, condition deals with tests, deals with question, and that's the if. The if is a test, the if is a question, basically you're asking. 53. When implementing a program, which of the following steps comes after executing? Maintain. So you gotta maintain the program, meaning that you gotta fix any bugs, any errors, send out any updates, and so on. 54. Which of the following is not a high-level programming language? D. This should be simple. So assembly is its own programming language, the assembly language. 55. Which of the following is an invalid variable name? D. 2 counts. Good, because you do not start a variable name with a number. 56. The decision box of a program flow chart shows the correct, the tests. So decision, that's another word. So decision, test, condition, question, those are interchangeable words. If, they are basically referring to the same thing in programming. 57. A computer programmer is coding an algorithm which calculates the class average for a given exam. He creates the variable class average. Which data type would you choose? Real, because real deals with decimals, and we'll need a decimal to hold those averages. 58. Which of the following options is the correct order can be used to replace 1, 2, and 3? C, correct. So prompting is when you ask somebody for something. Read is input. And process is calculation. 59. What is the name given to identifier that always holds the same value? A constant. Good. And we know that a variable changes. Which line contains a processing statement? C. Line 3. So process is calculation. Good. So that's it for this paper here. I think we're going to close off here for tonight. Any questions before we close? Next week we're going to work the paper too. By the time then, hopefully arts and business finish with it. Any questions before we close? All right, if no questions, that's it for tonight. Enjoy the rest of your night.